Joining us now on set is Kevin McCarthy, the former Speaker of the House. Welcome. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is a key ally of yours, says our Republican majority has completely failed. If you took a snapshot right now, would you agree with that?
I think they're in disarray, but it stems from those 8 working with all the Democrats. If there's no consequences...
The 8, you talking about the 8 hardliners?
The Gate 8, yeah. But they worked with all the Democrats to decide who could be Speaker, and since then, what has transpired? So the conference is broken because they never dealt with those 8, and until they do, it would stay broken. But to Marjorie's point is, Marjorie didn't do what Matt Gaetz did. She didn't make this privilege. She's making it an issue for a debate. Now, I think they should keep it internal. They should have their discussion. Look, being Speaker is not easy. Otherwise, maybe I'd still be there. But yeah, so
I figured that out. In fact, it seems like kind of a thankless job. If you were Speaker today, would you have voted with the 101 Republicans, which was a bit less than half, who backed the desperately needed aid for Ukraine, which is running out of ammunition and suffering civilian casualties?
Well, to be fair, if I was Speaker, that's not how it would come to the floor. But I would support Ukraine. I've always supported Ukraine. What should have happened here, you got to think strategically. You got to use the power of the speakership. It's the only majority. If the border is the #1 issue, don't sit back. We passed H.R. 2, but they, in essence, let the Senate Republicans negotiate. They're in a minority position.
Right.
The Speaker should negotiate directly with the President. Now, see, that's what we did on the debt ceiling. And we were able to get $2 trillion in cut, welfare reform, NEPA reform, $20 billion from the IRS. The Democrat leaders will never give you that unless the President. So after October 7th, they never should have put a pay-for on Israel money. It should have gone. It sent the wrong message to Iran and the rest of the world. But once you put that money out, you could have used Ukraine directly with the border. And I believe those who are complaining on either side, you'd have more input on how the Ukraine money should be spent. There's people who support Ukraine but don't like what the president's doing. What's our plan for victory? And you could patch it directly with the border. You would have won majority of H.R. 2, and you would have put those two together. And on that vote would probably be overwhelming, less Democrats voting for it.
Mr. Speaker, a major theme of the coverage has been Democrats bailed out Mike Johnson. And it's something you could have tried, but you didn't. And you've gotten praise for that. But doesn't that weaken a speaker when he can't provide the votes from his own party? And was yesterday's vote a rare defeat for the MAGA movement?
Well, look, people read all into that. The challenge here is you're asking a what if, and Mike hasn't done that. But if the Democrats come in and they save you, remember, a motion vacate could happen every day. It won't happen every day. And they'll extract something. They'll want something more. I say just govern fearlessly. Don't worry about the motion to vacate. Don't worry about what the press says. I could never win Speaker. I went 15 rounds, proved them wrong. They said we wouldn't be successful. You look at those first 9 months, not just the border bill, the energy bill, the Parents' Bill of Rights, the biggest cut ever voted in American history, more than $2 trillion. I mean, you could go bill after week, what we were able to accomplish. When you work together, even in a small majority, it's the same rules committee. It's pretty much close to the same majority. You could achieve a lot, but you have to use the majority for that benefit. If you're playing defense, you're going to be torn up inside.
So Hillary Clinton on a podcast, I got to ask you about this.
What?
Trump was just gaga over Putin because Putin does what Trump would like to do, kill his opposition, imprison his opposition, drive journalists and others into exile. I particularly don't like that last part. What do you think of the former presidential candidate's remarks?
I think she's upset that she lost, but also let's think about what she said. She said Putin drives the opponent away. What are they doing to President Trump today? They put him on trial. And let me ask everybody in America, does anybody in America believe President Trump would be on trial today if he wasn't running for president? Nobody believes that. What did they try to do? They tried to remove him from the ballot to even have the opportunity to be voted.
Which was outrageous.
Now what are they doing? They're spending all their time trying to remove Kennedy from the ballot. These people talk about a democracy.
Danger to democracy.
They are the dangers to try to deny democracy to this country. This is really concerning to me, what the Biden and the Democrats have done. I mean, I
want to get into the trial more in the next segment.
But has Hillary ever said she lost the 2016 election?
Yeah, she called Donald Trump and conceded.
But she never in press ever says that. She says it was.
She did call Donald Trump and concede.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get back to what happened nearly 7 months ago, because you were ousted because you tried to work with Democrats to keep the country from defaulting and to make what spending cuts you could.
No, that's what the press writes. That's not why I was.
Well, okay, so you're going to say it's all because of Matt Gaetz. What exactly did he do as far as a House ethics investigation?
Look, I don't want to get all this, but Matt came to me. Matt has an ethics complaint. And if you watch ABC News, apparently I'm not a liar, it's true, about he has a challenge with a minor and paying her money. It was put into place in ethics more before I ever became speaker. He wanted me to stop the ethics challenge. I wouldn't. So he got some other people who didn't vote for me, 8 people, and partnered with all the Democrats to remove me.
Well, he calls you a liar. He denies having sex with a minor.
So does he deny what Mark Wayne says he said about? Does he deny the testimony that the ethics committee has been given about what was said? Does he deny he came up to me to try to influence me? Does he deny he told other people, even from your same network, to call me about it? I don't know if all these people are liars. I don't believe that to be true. I know what transpired. Even if you look at Byron Donaldson's latest quote this week.
Byron Donalds, yeah, Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, that what Matt Gaetz did has broken the Republican majority. He's now created Lord of the Flies. Ask anybody inside our conference. They actually know it.
Well, so you're saying all the things that the press wrote about him, and certainly Gaetz was part of that, the congressman was, that, well, of course, it had partially to do with the fact that any single member, and you had to make that concession, could offer a motion to vacate, but it had nothing to do with spending.
Let's talk about the motion to vacate. Okay, that has been around for more than 100 years. Every speaker has lived with that, except Nancy on her second time. She changed it. I don't get to determine that. 218 people determine what the rules package are. The Democrats wouldn't support doing the difference, so I had to live with what is there. That's part of the job. That's fine. But I never woke up any morning worried about the motion to vacate. Could it happen? Yes.
Right. Well, I'm getting a sense of deja vu because while Marjorie Taylor Greene staunchly defended you.
Look, I don't believe that the motion to vacate will come to play because I think...
I didn't ask the question yet.
I know, but I know the direction you're going.
Well, the timing is unclear, so she doesn't have to pull the trigger. She says she's going to reevaluate.
But she didn't make it privileged. See, what Gaetz did was much different what Marjorie's doing. But listen, I think Republicans have learned from that probably wasn't the best idea. I think the outcome that they have now, they realize it wasn't a smart idea. That's what Byron and others are saying. I think what we're going in this close to an election, I think what helps the current speaker is, tell me this, if he is not the speaker, who can win it?
I don't know. It's a pretty thankless job. But have you advised Marjorie Taylor Greene on this? Because the point I was going to make is she defended you against a motion to vacate, and now she at least is pushing one, whether she follows through, we shall see, against Mike Johnson. And the controversy is many of the same things, cooperating with Democrats, spending too much, although, you know, he's part of a minority.
But you know what's interesting
in the federal government
on the spending? If you look at those who claim to be conservatives, the Matt Gaetzes of the world, they continued in a continuing resolution that actually spent $50 billion more as they moved through. They locked in Pelosi's policies. They denied the ability to have a border bill. I think if the country really sits back and look, and remember, our whole government is designed to have compromise. I don't think it's a bad thing that Democrats vote with Republicans. I like to get more Democrats to vote with me, that my idea is so strong that I even got them too. So to me, doesn't make sense. I just think let's govern and do what you said you're supposed to do. And I've watched a lot of people on both sides of the aisle make that happen.
Right, and I've watched a lot of Republicans, and Marjorie Taylor Greene isn't the only one, say, you know, we certainly haven't accomplished much in recent months since you left, and I don't think you would disagree with that. But I do need to get a break.
Well, press can write more of that, though.
All right. More with Kevin McCarthy in a moment as Joe Biden talks about his opponent's criminal trial.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.